Major Anya Kovac arrived at Forward Operating Base Archer like a whisper of dust. The transport chopper's blades beat a rhythmic thud against the oppressive heat, kicking up a storm of grit that coated everything in a fine, ochre film. Soldiers in sweat-stained fatigues barely glanced at her as she disembarked, her movements economical and precise. She carried a single, unadorned duffel bag, her posture straight, her gaze sweeping the perimeter not with the curiosity of a newcomer, but with the cool, appraising scan of a surveyor judging structural integrity. The base was a chaotic organism of sandbags, HESCO barriers, and humming generators, crouched in a valley cupped by jagged, hostile peaks. One peak, in particular, dominated the skyline. Hill 303, a jagged tooth of rock crowned with enemy fortifications. It was the reason this base existed, and the reason so many of its inhabitants were tense and short-tempered. Anya was assigned to the Tactical Operations Center as an analyst, a role that felt like a deliberate misfiling. Her records were sparse, heavily redacted, listing her last post as a training liaison stateside. To the men and women of FOB Archer, she was a staff officer, a rear echelon type sent to clutter the already cramped command tent. A woman in her late 30s, with hints of silver at her temples and eyes that seemed to hold the flat, calm light of a winter sky. She said little, her presence a quiet disruption to the boisterous, masculine energy of the command staff. She found her bunk in a cramped container, set her bag down, and assembled her rifle with a fluid efficiency that went unnoticed. She didn't decorate her space with pictures or letters. Her corner of the world was Spartan. A weapon, a uniform, and the quiet hum of her own thoughts. Her first briefing was a trial by indifference. Colonel Marcus Thorne, the FOB's commander, presided over the meeting. He was a man carved from granite and impatience, with a booming voice that left no room for dissent. He ran his finger over a digital map, the red icons on Hill 303 blinking like malevolent eyes. "They've dug in deep," he announced, his voice a low rumble of frustration. "Every time we push Bravo Company up that western slope, they get chewed to pieces by machine gun nests on the ridge. Air support can't get a clean angle. We're bleeding men for every inch." He glanced around the table, his eyes finally landing on Anya. He paused, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face, as if noticing a misplaced piece of furniture. "Major Kovac, is it? From Strategic Command." His tone was thick with skepticism. She was an unknown variable, and Thorne disliked variables. He saw a staff officer, a woman, someone sent from a distant air-conditioned headquarters to offer pointless advice. She simply nodded, her hands resting calmly on the table. "Yes, sir." Her voice was low, devoid of inflection. It didn't challenge, but it didn't defer either. It was simply a statement of fact. Thorne's gaze lingered for a moment longer, a clear, unspoken dismissal in his eyes. He saw no hardened field officer, no grizzled veteran. He saw a bureaucrat. He turned away, addressing a captain to his left. "Right. The plan remains the same. We'll soften them up with another mortar barrage at 0400. Then Bravo pushes again at first light. We'll get them this time." A collective, weary sigh seemed to hang in the air, too quiet for the colonel to notice, but Anya felt it. It was the sound of men being ordered to repeat a failure. She said nothing. She just watched the blinking red icons on the screen, her gaze distant, as if she were looking straight through the map and onto the hill itself. Her quiet stillness was mistaken for passivity. It was, in fact, the deepest form of attention. Colonel Thorne made his opinion of her presence explicit the next day. He found her in the TOC, standing before the large topographical map of the valley. She wasn't looking at the blinking lights of the digital display, but at the physical, three-dimensional model, her fingers tracing the contour lines of a deep, narrow ravine on the eastern face of Hill 303. It was a feature marked on the map as impassable terrain. "Something interesting you, Major?" Thorne's voice was laced with a condescending patronage. He stood with his arms crossed, projecting an aura of absolute authority. Anya withdrew her hand slowly. "The shadows, Colonel," she said, her voice even. The morning sun doesn't hit this ravine until almost 0900. The shadows would be deep. Thorne scoffed, a short, sharp sound of derision. It's a rock-strewn death trap, Major. A goat couldn't make it up that path, let alone a soldier in full kit. We have drone footage. It's a non-starter. He gestured vaguely at the western slope on the map, the site of all their failed assaults. The fight is here. Frontal assault. It's a matter of will. We just need to apply enough pressure. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, patronizing tone. Look, I appreciate the fresh eyes, Kovac, but this is a tactical problem, not an analytical one. It requires decisive action. We need men to take the ground. He straightened up, his chest puffing out slightly. Women are excellent analysts, great with logistics support roles. But they don't lead charges. It's a different mindset. The statement hung in the air, blunt and absolute. It was a door slammed in her face. The other officers in the TOC, a handful of lieutenants and captains, shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting from the colonel to Anya. They were waiting for a reaction. Anger, indignation, a stammered defense. They received none. Anya's expression remained unchanged. The winter sky calm in her eyes didn't even flicker. She held his gaze for a long moment, a silence stretching between them that was more profound than any argument. In that silence, she wasn't seeing the colonel. She was processing his tactical doctrine, his reliance on brute force, his dismissal of alternatives. She was analyzing him. "I understand, sir," she said finally. Her response was so devoid of emotion it seemed to unbalance him. He expected a fight and got a placid lake. He grunted, satisfied that he had established the hierarchy. "Good. Stick to the data, Major. Let my men handle the fighting." He turned and strode out of the TOC, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with unspoken judgment. Anya turned back to the map. Her finger, almost imperceptibly, hovered once more over the dark line of the ravine. Thorne had dismissed her. He had also given her his complete tactical profile. Predictable, unimaginative, and arrogant. It was more valuable than any data point on her screen. Anya did not argue. She observed. For the next 48 hours, she became a ghost in the machine of the FOB. She spent hours in the TOC, but not just staring at the screens. She listened to the radio chatter, the cadence of the voices, the subtle inflections of fear and fatigue from the platoons pinned down by fire from Hill 303. She cross-referenced the mortar strike reports with seismic sensor data, noting the blast patterns and the dead zones the enemy used for cover. She pulled up archival satellite imagery, studying the patterns of erosion and vegetation growth in the eastern ravine that Thorne had dismissed. She noted how the scrub brush was thicker near the base, suggesting water runoff, which in turn suggested a navigable channel, however slight. She watched the drone feeds not just of the enemy positions but of the enemy soldiers themselves. She observed their routines, the changing of the guard, the timing of their meals, the casual way they exposed themselves on the supposedly safe eastern ridge, confident in the impassable terrain below. She spoke to the soldiers who had returned from the failed assaults. She didn't ask about tactics or strategy. She asked about the ground. "What was the soil like after the mortars?" she asked a young private whose hands still trembled. "Wet, ma'am," he'd mumbled. "Slick clay. Hard to get a footing." She spoke to a medic. "What kinds of wounds are you treating most?" "Shrapnel from their RPGs, ma'am, and gunshot wounds from above. They just rain it down on us. We can't even see them." She found a grizzled sergeant from the engineering corps, a man named Odiambo with quiet, knowing eyes. She asked him about rock integrity in the region. "That granite on the east face?" he said, wiping grease from his hands. "It's old, brittle, prone to shearing, but stable if you know where to place your feet." Every conversation was a piece of a puzzle. Thorne saw a hill to be taken by force. Anya was building a blueprint of the hill's weaknesses, its rhythms, its very geology. Her focus was unnerving to those who noticed. Lieutenant Kai Tanaka, a young, eager officer in charge of a rifle platoon, watched her one evening. She was sitting alone at a makeshift table outside the mess hall, long after everyone else had left. She wasn't eating. She had a small, smooth stone in her hand, turning it over and over, her eyes fixed on the dark mass of Hill 303, stark against the twilight sky. She wasn't angry or frustrated. She looked, to him, like a master craftsman studying a flawed piece of wood, searching for the perfect place to make her cut. Her stillness was more intimidating than any of the colonel's shouted orders. It was the stillness of a predator. She was seeing things they were all missing. She saw the overconfidence of the enemy on the eastern ridge. She saw the predictable timing of the mortar barrages that served only to announce the coming assault. She saw the slick, muddy ground that bogged down Bravo Company. And she saw the deep, dark shadow of a ravine that everyone else had labeled impassable. A shadow that, to her, looked like a doorway. The pressure mounted as the third day bled into the fourth. At 0400, the mortars coughed their payloads into the sky. The explosions hammered the western face of Hill 303, a percussive display of feudal firepower. At 0530, as the first hint of gray lightened the eastern horizon, Bravo Company began their advance. The radio in the TOC crackled to life almost immediately. Contact! Contact! Ridgeline! 12 o'clock. They're dug in deeper than we thought. The voice was young, tight with panic. Colonel Thorne stood over the radio operator, his fists clenched. Push through Bravo 6, he yelled into the handset. Use the craters for cover. Push. But the reports only grew worse. Taking heavy fire. 2 men down. We can't advance, we're pinned. RPG. RPG. Medic. The calm professionalism of the initial radio calls frayed into raw, desperate pleas. The blinking green icons of Bravo Company on the digital map halted, then began to retreat, one by one. Red casualty icons started to pop up in their wake. Thorne slammed his hand on the table. Damn it! Again! He paced the confines of the TOC like a caged animal. His strategy, the only one he knew, was failing in real time, and the cost was being paid in the lives of his men. The air grew thick with the stench of failure and fear. Every officer in the room avoided his gaze. They had no new ideas, no solutions. They could only offer to repeat the same bloody mistake with more men. The radio crackled again. The voice of the company commander, Captain Eva Rostova, strained and breathless. TOC, this is Bravo 6. We are pulling back to the line of departure. I have 7 casualties, 2 critical. We cannot take that ridge, Colonel. Not like this. They have a clear field of fire for 600 meters. The finality in her voice silenced the room. Thorne's face was a mask of fury and impotence. He had thrown his best company at the problem 3 times, and 3 times they had been broken. His confidence, so absolute just hours before, was cracking. He stared at the map, at the mocking red icons on Hill 303, as if he could incinerate them with his glare. Get me a medevac, he roared, and get Rostova on the line. I want a full debrief, but everyone knew a debrief wouldn't change the tactical reality. The hill was a fortress. The conventional way was a meat grinder. The desperation in the TOC was palpable. It was the frantic energy of men who had run out of ideas and were facing a problem they could not solve. In the midst of this controlled chaos, a single, calm voice cut through the noise. Colonel, it was Anya Kovac. She hadn't moved from her spot by the topographical model. Her voice was quiet, yet it commanded the attention of the entire room. She stood with the same unnerving stillness, her winter sky eyes fixed on him. The moment of crisis had arrived. Anya stepped away from the topographical model and approached the central command table. The frantic energy in the TOC seemed to recede from her, repelled by her profound calm. Every eye was on her. Colonel Thorne turned, his face flushed with anger and frustration. What is it, Major? Don't you see I'm a little busy right now? His voice was a raw nerve. You've lost 9 men wounded, 2 critically, in the last 20 minutes. Anya stated, her tone flat, factual. It wasn't an accusation. It was a diagnosis. You will lose more if you send them again. Your approach announces itself. The mortars tell them we're coming. The route is a kill zone. They are waiting for you. Thorne's jaw tightened. Do you have a point? Or are you just here to critique? I have a solution, she said, her voice never rising. Give me a fire team. 3 men. And me. Give me Sergeant Odiambo from the engineers and Lieutenant Tanaka. And 1 other rifleman. Give us 6 smoke grenades, 6 fragmentation grenades, and climbing gear. We'll take the ridgeline for you. A stunned silence fell over the TOC. The audacity of the proposal was breathtaking. A few of the junior officers exchanged incredulous looks. One of them, a captain from S3 operations, let out a short, choked laugh before stifling it. Thorne stared at her as if she had lost her mind. You want to take a fortified enemy position with 4 people? Through a ravine my own scouts have designated impassable? Your scouts looked for a path for a platoon, Anya corrected him calmly. They were not looking for a path for a handful of climbers. The ravine isn't a path. It's a staircase. Sergeant Odiambo confirmed the rock is stable enough for pitons if needed. The shadows will conceal our approach until we are directly beneath the eastern nests. Their attention is entirely on the western slope, where they expect you to attack again. They feel safe on that side. Overconfidence is a tactical weakness. We will exploit it, she pointed to the topographical model. We move now, while they're resetting and rearming from Bravo's assault. We climb the ravine. We use the smoke to obscure their 2 main machine gun nests. From above, the wind is blowing west at 5 knots. Perfect. While they are blinded, we eliminate the nests. We will be on their flank before they even know they are being attacked. From there, we roll up their line. It will take less than 10 minutes once we are at the top. Her explanation was a cascade of tactical precision. There was no boasting, no ego. It was a cold, logical deconstruction of the problem. Thorne was speechless for a moment, caught between his ingrained disbelief and the undeniable coherence of her plan. It was insane, but it was also the only new idea he had heard in days. His desperation warred with his pride. He looked at the casualty reports on the screen, then back at Anya's unwavering gaze. And why Odiambo and Tanaka? He demanded, grasping for a flaw. Odiambo knows stone and is steady under pressure. Tanaka is fast and disciplined. I've watched them, she said simply. The admission that she had been evaluating his men sent a small shiver through the room. This is madness, the S3 captain muttered. Thorne shot him a glare that could curdle milk. He looked back at Anya. He was a man drowning, and she was offering him a strange, thin rope. He had a choice. Drown in his own failed doctrine or grasp the unbelievable. You have 1 hour? Thorne bit out, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. 1 hour. After that, I'm pulling you back and leveling that entire ridge with everything I've got. God help anyone still up there. Get your team. The shift in the TOC was immediate. The frantic, desperate energy was replaced by a tense, focused curiosity. Thorne's reluctant approval, born of sheer desperation, had sanctioned the impossible. The other officers watched, their skepticism warring with a nascent flicker of hope, as Anya moved with an unnerving purpose. She didn't hurry. Her movements were deliberate, efficient. She found Lieutenant Tanaka first. He was helping unload the wounded from a transport, his face pale and grim. Lieutenant. Anya's voice was quiet but cut through the noise. The colonel has approved a new assault plan. You're with me. Grab your kit and 1 rifleman you trust. Meet at the motor pool in 5-inch. Tanaka, accustomed to lengthy orders and detailed briefings, was taken aback by the sheer brevity. He saw the look in her eyes, though, and any questions he had died on his lips. Yes, ma'am, he said, a new energy surging through him. He grabbed a young, wiry private named Garcia. Next, she found Sergeant Samuel Odiambo in the engineering bay, methodically cleaning a set of tools. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. Sergeant, she said, I need you and a set of climbing gear. Pitons, ropes, harnesses for 4. We're going up the east ravine of 303-inch. Odhiambo didn't so much as blink. He had seen her studying the maps. He had answered her questions about the rock. He simply nodded, a deep, rumbling understood coming from his chest. He turned and began gathering the equipment with a quiet competence that mirrored her own. As the small team gathered by a light tactical vehicle, the assumptions about Major Kovac began to crumble. She wasn't barking orders. She was inspecting their gear with a meticulous eye. She checked the seating of Tanaka's magazines. She tested the tension on Odhiambo's climbing harness. She ran a thumb along the edge of a piton. She laid out the 6 smoke grenades and 6 fragmentation grenades on the hood of the vehicle. Tanaka, you and Garcia are Team Alpha. Odhiambo, you're with me. Team Bravo, she began, her voice low and direct. Odhiambo will lead the climb. He sets the lines if we need them. I will be second. Alpha Team follows. Absolute noise discipline. No radio chatter until we are on the summit. We move fast, we move quiet. She looked at each of them in turn. The enemy on that ridge feels safe. They are sloppy. We are using that. Once we're at the top, I will signal. Bravo takes the northern nest. Alpha, you take the southern. 2 frag grenades in each, followed by immediate entry. Use the smoke to obscure their line of sight down the ridge, not to hide our approach. Let them see the smoke and wonder what it is. We use their confusion as our cover. The level of detail, the confidence in her voice, was mesmerizing. This wasn't the plan of a staff analyst. This was the plan of a seasoned predator. In the TOC, Thorne and his staff watched on a drone feed as the 4 soldiers, dwarfed by the landscape, began their approach to the base of the ravine. The S3 captain stood beside him. Colonel, who is she? He whispered. Thorne didn't answer. He just stared at the screen, his expression unreadable, as Anya Kovac and her tiny team disappeared into the deep shadows of the impassable ravine. The climb was a vertical nightmare, a silent, grueling ascent through a world of shadow and sharp rock. Sergeant Odhiambo moved like a creature born to the stone, his large hands finding secure holds with an instinctual grace. He tested every foothold before putting his weight on it, his movements economical and silent. Anya followed right behind him, her own ascent just as fluid, mirroring his discipline. She carried the weight of her gear and the mission without a single wasted motion. Her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. Below her, Lieutenant Tanaka and Private Garcia struggled to keep pace, their youth and strength hampered by inexperience on this kind of terrain. The loose scree shifted under their boots, sending small pebbles skittering down into the darkness. Each time, Anya would pause, her head cocked, listening to the silence above, ensuring the noise hadn't carried. Tanaka felt a hot flush of shame with every misstep, but Anya never once looked back with impatience. Her focus was entirely forward, upward. They were in the belly of the beast, hidden from the sun and the eyes of the enemy. The ravine was deeper and narrower than it appeared on the maps, the rock walls pressing in on them. At one point, they reached a sheer 10-meter face. Odhiambo didn't hesitate. He pulled a piton and hammer from his belt, and with a few muffled, expert taps, drove the steel spike into a fissure. The sound was terrifyingly loud in the confined space, but it was absorbed by the rock. He secured a line, and they ascended, one by one, into the upper reaches of the ravine. Tanaka, his heart pounding against his ribs, looked up and saw the lip of the ridge just 30 meters above them. He could hear the faint murmur of voices, speaking a language he didn't understand. The enemy was right there. They were completely exposed. Yet no alarms were raised. No shots were fired. Anya's prediction had been correct. The enemy's attention was a searchlight fixed on the western slope, leaving their back door shrouded in a darkness of their own making. Anya called a halt just below the summit, pressing them flat against the rock face. She held up 4 fingers, then 3, then 2, then 1, her movements slow and deliberate. On 0, she pulled the pin from a smoke grenade. Tanaka did the same. With a gentle underhand toss, she lobbed the canister up and over the edge. Tanaka followed suit. 2 perfect arcs, landing exactly where she had planned, just in front of the two primary machine gun positions. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, thick plumes of white smoke billowed forth, not obscuring the climbers, but blinding the nests. Confused shouts echoed from the summit. The enemy didn't know what was happening. Was it a misfired mortar? A strange trick of the wind? Go! Anya breathed. It was the only command she gave. Odhiambo surged over the ledge, a massive, silent shadow. Anya was right behind him, her rifle already at her shoulder. Tanaka and Garcia scrambled up after them, their lungs burning. They emerged into a scene of chaos. The smoke had done its job perfectly. The machine gun crews were standing up, peering into the white cloud, their backs completely exposed. Anya and Odhiambo were on the northern nest in a heartbeat. Anya didn't waste bullets. 2 precise double taps from her rifle, and the 2 gunners crumpled to the ground. Simultaneously, Odhiambo cleared the rest of the position with a brutal efficiency that was shocking to witness. To the south, Tanaka and Garcia mirrored the action. They threw their fragmentation grenades into the heart of the second nest. The explosions were deafening, a 1-2 punch that ripped the air apart. They rushed forward into the dust and smoke, their rifles firing, eliminating the dazed and wounded survivors. It was over in seconds. The 2 key defensive positions were silenced. But the charge wasn't finished. Anya didn't pause to celebrate or regroup. "Roll it up," she commanded, her voice sharp and clear over the ringing in their ears. She pointed down the ridgeline. The remaining enemy soldiers, caught in their trenches and secondary positions, were now looking back in stunned confusion, their flank completely compromised. Anya and her team became a storm of controlled violence. They leapfrogged from cover to cover, a 4-person fire and maneuver element executing with the precision of a full platoon. Anya was the tip of the spear. She moved with an eerie grace, her rifle spitting single, aimed shots. She wasn't spraying. She was picking targets. An RPG gunner preparing to fire on the valley below. A radio operator calling for help. A squad leader trying to rally his men. Each fell to a single, precise round. Odhiambo was her anchor, laying down suppressing fire with his light machine gun. His presence a solid wall of force. Tanaka and Garcia, fueled by adrenaline and awe, followed her lead, clearing trenches with a ferocity they didn't know they possessed. From the moment they crested the ridge to the moment the last pocket of resistance was silenced, less than 7 minutes had passed. Hill 303, the bloody fortress that had held the entire battalion at bay for weeks, was theirs. Anya stood on the summit, the wind whipping at her uniform, and keyed her radio. Her voice was perfectly calm, as if she were reporting a weather update. "TOC, this is Kovac. The ridge is secure. Send up Bravo Company." In the TOC, there was only stunned silence. The drone operator had struggled to keep the camera on the action. The feed was a chaotic blur of smoke, muzzle flashes, and 4 figures moving with impossible speed and lethality. The officers had watched, mouths agape, as the tiny team dismantled a fortified position that had chewed up an entire company. Colonel Thorne stood frozen, his hand gripping the edge of the table, so hard his knuckles were white. He had watched Anya Kovac move. He had seen the cold, brutal economy of her violence. That wasn't an analyst. That wasn't a staff officer. That was something else entirely. "Get Bravo Company moving," he finally roared, his voice hoarse. "Now!" As the order was relayed, a different comms channel chirped. It was a high-priority message from Strategic Command Headquarters. The young communications specialist answered, his face pale. "Colonel Thorne, sir," he stammered, holding out the handset. "It's for you. A General Vance from Stratcom." Thorne took the phone, his mind still reeling. "Thorne here, Colonel," a gravelly voice on the other end said, cutting straight to the point. "I'm getting a preliminary report of an unsanctioned assault on Hill 303, led by a Major Kovac. Is that accurate?" Thorne swallowed. "Yes, General. The hill is taken." There was a pause on the other end. "I see. Colonel, I need you to confirm something for me." Was the operative's call sign ever invoked? Thorne was confused. Call sign, General? I don't understand. She's Major Anya Kovac, an analyst from your command. Another, longer pause. The silence from the general was heavy, freighted with meaning. Colonel, pull up Major Kovac's file. The sealed annex. Authorization code, Victor Alpha Niner Niner. Thorne turned to his S3 captain. Do it. Now the captain fumbled with the keyboard, his fingers shaking slightly. He accessed Anya's file, a sparse, uninformative document. But at the bottom was a link to a sealed annex, requiring a high-level clearance. He typed in the code General Vance had provided. The file opened. It was almost entirely blacked out, long lines of redacted text hiding years of clandestine operations. But a few words and phrases were left visible. Operation Nightshade, Mission Kill/Capture, Deep Infiltration, and at the very top, next to her name, was a single stark word. A call sign. Spectre. The S3 captain stared at the screen, his blood running cold. He looked at Thorne. Sir, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Her call sign. It's Spectre. The name dropped into the silent TOC like a grenade. Spectre wasn't just a call sign. It was a legend. A ghost story whispered by Special Forces operators. A name synonymous with impossible missions carried out in total secrecy. The leader of a Black Ops unit so classified most of the military didn't know it existed. A unit that was officially disbanded 5 years ago. Spectre wasn't a person. It was a phantom, a weapon. Thorne stared at the screen, the single word burning into his memory. He looked at the drone feed, at the lone female figure standing calmly on the summit she had just taken. And he finally, truly understood who he had dismissed. He finally understood who he had told that women don't lead charges. He felt a profound, chilling wave of humility wash over him. General, he said into the phone, his own voice now a whisper. I understand. Colonel Thorne left the TOC and walked out into the harsh sunlight of the valley floor. He moved without his usual bluster, his stride measured, thoughtful. The entire base was buzzing. News of the assault had spread like wildfire, a mixture of rumor and disbelieving fact. Soldiers gathered in small groups, pointing up at Hill 303, now silent and inert. They spoke in hushed, awestruck tones. 4 of them took the whole ridge? I heard it was that new major. The quiet 1-inch. The myth was already being born. Thorne saw a Bravo company assembling, preparing to move up the now safe western slope to secure and fortify the captured position. They moved with a purpose and energy that hadn't been there this morning. Hope had been restored. He waited at the edge of the base, near the mouth of the ravine. An hour later he saw them, 4 figures walking slowly out of the shadows. They were covered in dust and grime, their faces smeared with sweat and cordite. Odiambo moved with his same steady gait, though he carried a new exhaustion in his shoulders. Tanaka and Garcia looked dazed, their eyes wide with a mixture of horror and exhilaration, as if they were struggling to process what they had just done. And then there was Anya. She walked with the same measured pace as always. Her rifle was held at a low ready, her posture still perfect despite the grueling climb and the violent, close-quarters combat. She looked weary, but unbroken. Her calm was still intact. As they approached the perimeter, a silence fell over the assembled soldiers. The conversations stopped. The work ceased. Everyone turned to watch. They weren't just looking at a major anymore. They were looking at the woman who had taken the hill. Thorne walked forward to meet them. He stopped directly in front of Anya. The 4 of them halted. Tanaka and Garcia instinctively stiffened, preparing to salute. Anya simply met the colonel's gaze, her expression unreadable. Thorne looked at her, at the smudges of dirt on her cheek, the utter lack of triumph in her eyes. He saw the quiet professional who had done a job. He thought of his own arrogant words in the TOC, the casual, condescending dismissal. Women don't lead charges. The memory of it burned with shame. He didn't offer a handshake. He didn't offer words of praise or apology. Words were insufficient. Instead, Colonel Marcus Thorne, a man known for his rigid pride, drew himself up to his full height, brought his hand to his brow in a slow, deliberate motion, and rendered the sharpest, most formal salute of his career. It wasn't the salute of a superior officer to a subordinate. It was the salute of a soldier to a warrior. Anya held his gaze for a beat longer. Then she gave a short, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. It was enough. The gesture of respect had been offered, and it had been accepted. Thorne dropped his salute. He turned to the other three. Sergeant, Lieutenant, get your men to the medics for checkout. Well done. He turned and walked away without another word, his back ramrod straight. As he walked, a ripple spread through the watching crowd. One by one, then in groups, the soldiers began to raise their hands in salute. The engineers, the medics, the infantrymen of Bravo Company. They all saluted her, not because of her rank, but because of her actions. Anya Kovac stood for a moment, bathed in the silent, profound respect of the men and women of FOB Archer. She didn't smile. She didn't preen. She simply took it in, a quiet confirmation of a truth she had always known about herself. Then she turned to her small team. Go on, she said softly. Get some water. The next day, the sun rose over a transformed landscape. Hill 303 was no longer a threat. It was an asset. American soldiers manned the same fortifications that had rained down death just 24 hours earlier. The mood on FOB Archer was lighter. The tension that had permeated the air for weeks finally broken. The charges had been led. The hill had been taken. The impossible had been made real. Anya Kovac was not in the TOC for the morning briefing. She was not receiving congratulations or accepting awards. She was found by Lieutenant Tanaka at a small, secluded overlook on the western edge of the base, a spot that offered a clear view of the captured hill. She was sitting on an empty ammunition crate, methodically field-stripping her rifle. Her movements were the same as they had been upon her arrival. Precise, economical, and focused. The pieces of the weapon were laid out on a clean cloth in perfect order. Tanaka approached hesitantly. Ma'am. Anya looked up. The winter skycom was still there. Lieutenant. I just wanted to say thank you, he stammered. Yesterday. I've never seen anything like it. Anya paused in her work, wiping a light film of oil onto the bolt carrier group. You did your job, Tanaka. You followed your orders. You kept your nerve. That's all that's ever required. She looked back down at her weapon, her attention already returning to the task at hand. There was no praise, no admonishment, just a simple statement of fact. Her world was not built on accolades or reputation. It was built on process, discipline, and function. He stood there for a moment longer, realizing the conversation was over. The respect she had earned was not something she celebrated. It was simply the new state of things, an environmental condition she had created through sheer competence. He saluted, a gesture that now felt natural and right. Ma'am, he turned and left her to her work. Anya finished cleaning her rifle. She reassembled it with the same fluid grace, the click of the parts seating together the only sound in the quiet morning air. She worked the charging handle, did a function check, and then set the weapon aside. She didn't look at the hill. She already knew its contours, its secrets. She had solved that problem. Her gaze was now fixed on the next ridgeline, farther east, deeper in enemy territory. She was already studying the play of light and shadow on its slopes, analyzing the terrain, identifying the weaknesses. The respect of others was a byproduct, not a goal. The mission was the only thing that mattered. The symbolic image lingered long after Tanaka had gone. A solitary woman, her duty done, already preparing for the next one. Her dignity and lethal competence a silent, unassailable fact, as solid and real as the hill she had taken. The specter was quiet again, waiting for the next shadow to fall.